Alrighty, hey guys. Man, so good to see all you guys back. I know you guys probably had heaps of things to do on Fridays, but I was lost not being at you. So I'm so glad we're back. And hey, big shout out to a bunch of our Year 6s. First time here. Why don't we welcome them, right? Give a big clap for our Year 6s. So good to see you guys. Hey, when I was in, who's 16? What year is that? Year 10? Yeah, I think it was like year 10. I used to play rugby, and we went on a tour to New Zealand. And so while we were playing there on our off days, we were doing like different activities. So they'll take you hiking and, do a bunch of, extracurricular, can I say it, activities. But one of those things was going caving. And so if you've never been caving before, caving isn't something that I would just choose to do myself, right? You've got to go through these like narrow holes and, just like climb under. I think there'll be some pictures that sort of come up of what it looks like. There was one time where we had to abseil down this waterfall. And when I was there, I'm like looking at these small holes and thinking, there's no way that I'm going to fit through this. Like there's no way I'm going to get in there. And right at the start of the cave, as we were going in, there were these massive spiders, and if you know me, I hate spiders. It took my team half an hour to convince me to actually get into the cave, right? It was something scary, something that I didn't know what to do. But here's the thing, we weren't doing this on our own. We had a guide who was going along with us and taking us along the way. And he would go in and know exactly what to do. It was completely dark in there, like you wouldn't know whether to go right or to go left. And he would know exactly where to go and lead us down that way. When we went to these little tiny spaces where it's like, there's no way we're going to get through there, he'll show us how to do the little maneuvers and put your body the right way in order to get through those little holes. And when we got to the waterfall, he's the one that went down first. And when he was down there and made sure that it was secure, he made sure that we could come down safely along the way. Now, it was still scary. And there were times where we were like, I don't know if I want to do this. But because he was going in front of us, guiding us each step of the way, you felt safe. You felt like, okay, even though this is scary, I can do it. And before we went into the cave, right at the start where all those spiders were, he gave us this little pep talk. And he told us 3 things, right? He says, when we go in there's certain things that only I can do. I can only go down the waterfall first. You can't do that. There's things that you can do. You can help each other along. You can encourage each other along, but there's only things that I can do. Secondly, there's things that you can do as you encourage each other along. And then thirdly, there's things that I definitely don't want you to do. I don't want you to run along ahead and think that you can lead everyone. That's the only thing that I can do. 3 things. Things that he can do, things that we can do, and things that we shouldn't do. This part that Rachel just read for us, right? It's sort of like Jesus giving his disciples this pep talk just before they're going to go on this journey ahead. See, in these last chapters of John, Jesus' disciples, they're just about to have their whole world turned upside down. See, Jesus, for the first half of this book, he's been displaying amazing powers. He's been turning water into wine. He fed thousands of people with just a few slices of bread and 2 fish. Jesus has been healing people, making people see again. People who were blind and now they can see. People who couldn't walk, now they can walk. Jesus has even raised people from the dead. Jesus has shown that he has amazing power and his disciples are excited. They're like, this is our leader. Like no one can mess with us as long as Jesus is with us. Look at all the power that he has. But what's about to happen is like going through a dark cave. Because what's about to happen in the next few hours is that their king, their leader who they've been following, he's going to be betrayed, he's going to be beaten, and he's going to be killed. And this isn't something that the disciples were ready for. And so what Jesus is doing from this chapter 13 onwards that we're going to be looking at this term, he's given them a pep talk. And the big thing that he wants them to know, and the big thing that he wants you to know, is to take heart. See, to take heart means that even though things will be hard, even though things will be scary, even though it might seem like everything is lost, Jesus wants his disciples to take heart and know this is not the end. That everything that is about to happen, even though it looks completely out of control, he wants them to know that he's in complete control about what's going on. He wants them to take heart and know that he's there, and he wants them to know how to continue when he's gone. And for us today, we're in a similar situation to the disciples because Jesus is just about to leave them and he's not going to be with them physically. And us today in 2025, Jesus is not physically here with us now. And there may be times where you think, is Jesus actually in control? You may think at those times when you're sad and lonely, when you're looking around at things going on in your life, things that are going around in the world, and think, is Jesus really in control? And just like Jesus said to his disciples, he wants to say to us, I'm in control. Take heart, I'm in control. Look to me, trust me, I got you. And just like how that guide at the start of our caving gave us those three things, Jesus says similar things to us through this passage that we just read. See, the three things that Jesus says that we're going to look into is he tells us what he came to do, he tells us what we can do, and he tells us what we can't do. Jesus tells us what he came to do, what you can do, and what you can't do. So let's have a look at those first few verses at what he said. So we enter this scene, right, where Jesus, he's having dinner with his disciples, and one of his best friends, Judas, who is with him from the start, he's just about to go to betray Jesus. He's gone to all of Jesus' enemies who want to kill him, and he's going to sell Jesus out. And now Jesus begins his talk with those that are his true followers, those that have been with him and will be with him till the end. And here's what he says. He says, when Judas was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. Now, what's Jesus saying here, right? And a word that keeps getting repeated, it gets repeated 5 times in two sentences, is glorify. Now, when you think about the word glory, I wonder what comes to mind. You know, maybe you think about people looking at it like, look, wow, how good is that person? Look at what they can do. How crazy it is what they've done. And one of the people that I think about when I think about glory, because this was what he was seeking after, was Logan Paul. Now, I started watching Logan Paul way back when he had his daily vlogs. Like, I know I shouldn't be watching him. I'm like quite older than you guys. But I was watching him, and I used to watch him religiously every day. And one of the things that he used to say to himself, he says this was his like mantra, the thing he said again and again, says, I will be the greatest entertainer in the world. And he said that again and again and again to himself. What are you doing? Again and again to himself. And he got there, right? Like if you look at social media today, if you look at WWE, he's made a name for himself. Everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people know who Logan Paul is. He achieved being a great entertainer. The thing about him is that his glory is all about him. And when we think about glory, that's what we want too, right? We want people to look at us and it's all about us. But the glory that Jesus is talking about looks very different because the glory of Jesus and the glory of God is about others. So there are many things that Jesus is glorified for and would have been glorified for at that time. Think about it, right? He's been healing people. He's raised people from the dead. He's turned water into the wine. Jesus could have been the greatest entertainer the world has ever seen. But when Jesus talks about glory, he's not talking about all the miracles that he's just done. He's talking about what's about to happen. He's talking about where he'll be betrayed, where he'll be beaten and killed on a cross. Now have a look at that, right? That's, a nice picture of a cross. But when you look at what actually happened on the cross, people were beaten, they were bloody, and they were hung naked on a cross. And when you look at a cross, when people walked past people who were dying on the cross, there was nothing glorious about that. How could you look at that and say, look at how good this is? But for God, but for Jesus, this is what glory looked like. Because on that cross, as Jesus died, what was happening at that moment, what looked like the most horrible moment in history was the most glorious time in history, or the glorious thing happening in history. Because Jesus is saying, for those of you that have put your trust in me, for those of you that have rejected God, you no longer have to worry about what's going to happen to you after I've died for you. See, Jesus goes ahead and takes the punishment that you and I deserve, that every single person who has ever lived and every person that will come, Jesus dies on the cross for them and says, this is what glory looks like for me, to lay my life down for you so that you can know that there's a life to come. So that you can know that when you take your last breath on this earth, you don't have to be afraid of what's to come because I've already taken that punishment for you. See, Jesus takes what we think about glory and he turns it on its head. And he says, glory for me looks like me giving my life up for you. Jesus came and died so that we can live forever. That's what Jesus came to do. And that's what he's telling his disciples now. They're expecting Jesus to go and defeat all his enemies. He's got all this power, but Jesus is saying, actually, this is what's about to happen. I'm about to lay my life down. So that's what Jesus can do, what only Jesus can do. But he moves on now and he says, I want you to know, secondly, here's what you can do. You're not just coming along for the ride and just going to sit in the back and do nothing. Here's what you can do as my disciples. He says, a new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. See, the disciples, they can't go and die for the world. They can't save anyone by giving up their life. But what they can do is that they can love like Jesus. Now, we all know, right, that loving people is a good thing. I don't think any of us just go out and say, I'm just going to hate people today. Maybe you do, but most people don't do that. They go out and they know that, look, loving people is a good thing. We want to try and do right by people. We don't want to just make people feel sad or bad for the wrong thing. And you've heard this phrase before, right? Treat others just as how you want to be treated. And you know that phrase actually comes from the Bible. A long, long time ago in the Old Testament, God said this to his people. He says, don't seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. So this is something that God had said to his people. But now what Jesus is coming to do, he's saying, you've heard that this was said, but now I'm giving you a new commandment. I'm going to make it go a step further. I want you to love people, not how you want to be treated, but I want you to love people just as I have loved you. And how has Jesus loved his disciples? Jesus has loved his disciples and will love his disciples even when he gets nothing back from it. He loves his disciples even when it's hard. And in this section, just before he's having dinner with his disciples, what Jesus has done is that as they've come in for dinner, right, back then, they wore sandals, so everywhere that they walked on dirt roads, their feet would have been sweaty, it would have been smelly, and so before you sit down for dinner, you would wash your feet. And when he came into the house and just before dinner, Jesus is the one that washes their feet. No one tells him to do it, he just gets down and he does that. And what that is modeling is what Jesus is just about to do. Just as he laid down like a servant to wash their feet, he's also about to lay down his life. And Jesus is saying, that's how I want you to love others. Jesus says, I don't want you to love others only when they're being nice to you. I don't want you to love others only when it's easy or when you're getting something back. I want you to love them just as I have loved you, even when it's hard. You know, a story that I heard about this that always gets me every time is there was this man who came from another country, who was a refugee in Australia. When he came here, didn't know how to speak the language, didn't have a job, didn't have any of the right documents or anything like that. And there was a man, Christian man, who got in touch with this guy, and he helped him get settled in the country. He helped him get the right documents that he needed, he helped him get accommodation, helped him get food, helped him do everything that he needed. Now this man, this Christian man, he wasn't someone who was well spoken. He wouldn't go up and know exactly what passages from the Bible to tell you. He wouldn't know, how to really explain a lot of the stuff from the Bible. But he knew how to love this guy. And listen to what this refugee said to this guy. He says, I don't know who your God is, but if he's anything like you, I want to know him. That's the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. That's the kind of sacrificial love where this man didn't have to do anything for this guy from this other country, but because he knew of Jesus, because he was a follower of Jesus, he listened to what Jesus said and loved him in that way. Now, if you're someone who follows Jesus, this command is for you and me to love just like how Jesus has loved us. See, often as Christians, we can really be good at knowing a lot of stuff about God. We're really good at, if someone says, hey, where in this Bible where from the Bible does this passage come from? We can turn to the right page and say like, look, here it is. We can be really good at making different arguments about, why Christianity is real. And that's all good. That's all really good head knowledge to have. But what Jesus is saying is that people aren't going to know that you're his disciples by how well you can argue. People aren't going to know that you're his disciple by how many Bible verses that you remember. Again, all those things are good things. But what Jesus says is that they will know that you're my disciples by the way that you love one another. By loving each other just as I loved you, just like that man who loved that refugee. And so I want to put it out there to you. If you're a follower of Jesus, how are you loving as Jesus has loved? Maybe it might be including others in your friendship groups who might be feeling left out. Maybe if you're having an argument with someone, you're the first one to apologize. Maybe it's doing something nice just for the sake of it, not expecting to get anything back. I remember a friend from church, he bought me this mad Penrith singlet, right? When we just won the third grand final and he got me this mad singlet. I was like, bro, why'd you get me this? He's like, oh, I know you love the Panthers, so I got this for you. I didn't do anything for him, but just something nice. It might be messaging a friend who you haven't seen in a while. There are many, many ways I'm sure that you can think of about how you can love someone without loving them back. But when you do that, know that you're loving just like how Jesus has loved. Now, Jesus has told them, right, what he's come to do, to lay his life down for them. He's told them what they can do by loving just as he has loved. And now the last thing that he tells them is, this is what you can't do. So we see Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you? I will lay down my life for you. Then Jesus answered, will you really lay your life down for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. So Jesus is telling them all this stuff about this is how you are to love one another. And Peter's still stuck on the fact, Jesus, why can't I follow you? Why can't I follow you where you're going? Because everything else Jesus has been doing, he's taken his disciples along with them. When he was healing people, when he was telling people why he had come to earth, all the disciples were there and listening to what Jesus was doing and learning from him. But now Jesus is saying something weird. Why can't I come with you? Now, Peter's one of those guys who is loyal, right? At the launch last year, if you remember, we looked at Peter's life and, his whole character. But he's someone is that, if you got into a fight, he's who you want. You want him on your side because he's going to throw hands for you. Like he's got your back. But here's the thing that Peter didn't realize. The fight that's about to happen is a fight that he can't fight. See, Peter can't go to die and save himself. It's only something that Jesus can do. Jesus is about to lay his life down for Peter, and look at what Peter says to him, Lord, I'll lay my life down for you. You see, at this point, Peter doesn't understand that he doesn't need to be the hero in the situation. He needs to take a step back and realize that Jesus is the only one that can save him. And Jesus calls him out on this, right? He says, before morning comes, right? So they're having dinner that night. Before the next morning comes, you're going to betray me. And we're going to look at this in a couple of weeks. But when people ask Peter about, surely you were the one that was hanging out with Jesus, Peter's like, no, I didn't know him. Peter completely denies knowing Jesus. And why does Jesus do this? I don't think Jesus does this to shame Peter. He's not saying like, you're a dog for doing this, for betraying me. But what he's saying to Peter is he's trying to show him that you don't have it all together. That you need to trust me. You're a human and you will fail. And Peter needs to realize that he needs Jesus just as much as all of us in this room needs Jesus. Many of us can have that same attitude as Peter, right? We can be so confident in ourselves that we think that we don't need Jesus, that we just forget about him. Some of you might be so obsessed of trying to live such a good life because you feel like if you don't, there's no way that you can make it into heaven. But you're just relying on your strength, just like Peter. See, getting to heaven isn't something that you can do on your own. What God is saying to us is that you need to stop trying to be the hero and let Jesus do what only he can do and save you. I'm going to invite Blake up, right? Blake's going to help me illustrate this for us. Why don't you welcome Blake up? He looks good in this getup, eh? I like it. All right, so sort of like this, right? I'm a bit harder. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Tell when to stop.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. All right. I'll blindfold you as well. Yeah, I'll do it. All right, come here. Spin you around a few times. All right. Now, Blake, I want you to pick Nathan's guitar up and start playing I Love God for us. Look, I'll help you. I'll give you the guitar. Can you play it for us?
I can try.
Let's see. This is exactly what we're like, right? Come here. Sorry. This is exactly what we're like when we're trying to say that we can save ourselves, that we can get into heaven by the things that we do. It's like just being cable-tied and blindfolded. This is exactly what Peter was doing. He was saying, I can lay my life down for you, and the reality is that he can do nothing. Let me give Blake a hand. I don't have, you have to figure that out. No, sorry, bro. No. See, the whole point of that is to show us that we can try as hard as we can to save ourselves. We can try and rely on our own effort, but there is nothing that we can do to save ourselves. And so Jesus is saying, the whole reason I came was that so you can have life, so that you can know how to be with God forever. And so I want to sum up tonight by asking you, what are you going to do with these three things that Jesus has said? You know, maybe in one group where you just need to understand what Jesus came to do. You've been invited along here for the first time. Maybe you don't come from a home that has talked about Jesus and Christianity. What I want you to do is make an effort to commit to coming here every Friday night this term. Only don't come if you're dying on your bed, right? I want you to make an effort to come here every Friday and have a listen to what Jesus is about to say over these next few chapters about who he is and what he came to do. But secondly, for those of you that are Christians, for those of you that do follow Jesus, how are you going to love like Jesus? And you know, a great way to think about where you're going to start is your discussion groups straight after here. You know, so often when we come here, we can have like our little friend groups and there's people around us who we just sort of start leaving out. What would it look like this year if you started loving everyone in your discussion group? Even the people that are hard to love. And thirdly, maybe there are some of you here tonight who are realizing that you can't save yourself. That all this while you're trying to be this good Christian, trying to earn God's love, trying to earn your way to heaven. And just like Peter thinking, this is what I can do. But God is saying to you tonight, come to me. Come to me because you can't do this on your own, and start trusting Jesus. If that's you, what I'd love for you to do is in your discussion groups, talk to your leader about that. Tell them that you want to take that next step of knowing what it looks like to trust Jesus. Because he's come to save you. He's come so that you can have life and have it to the full. And that's what we're going to be looking at this term, that even though things might look scary at times, even though it might look like things are lost, Jesus is in complete control. And we'll see that just as he rose again from the dead, he shows us today that he'll return again and that we can take heart knowing that he's in complete control of all things. Why don't you join me as I pray? Lord, we thank you for these words of Jesus, that even though the disciples weren't 100% sure about what was about to happen, over these next few chapters, we're going to see that Jesus assures them that he is in complete control. And Lord, we thank you so much for your character, that you're a good God who didn't just leave us in our mess and say, go sort all of this out yourself, but what glory looked like for you was to lay down your life. And Holy Spirit, I ask that you would not let any of us walk out of here tonight without you really helping to truly understand how great that is for us. We thank you, Lord Jesus, for what you've done for us, that you left your throne above to become a man and to die naked on a cross so that we can have life forever. We thank you for that, Father. Amen.